Hi everyone, my name is Brigida Kalimabusela and welcome to The Divine Edge. So today is a bit of a story time where I actually want to share my testimony and some of the things that I've learned along the journey. But I'm starting it with a conversation that's been going around my peers, right? There's this conversation we've been having around things not working out the way we thought they would work out. And I actually want to weigh in on this conversation because, like many of my peers, this is not the life that I dream for myself. And I'm actually calling this series, This Is Not the Life That I've Dreamed for Myself, and not in the way you think. Because I do want to offer a new perspective to this topic, because as much as it's important for us to share how we feel and to sort of vent out the struggles that we're facing, which are very, very valid, I do think it's very important that we can leave the conversation believing better thoughts about ourselves and feeling a bit better about our situation and having a little bit more perspective. So let's start. Let's start. This is not the life that I dream for myself, right? So if we think about that topic, right, this is not the life that I dream for myself. It's possible, very, very possible that maybe that's the point of life, right? So if we read in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 to 9, and I'm going to read the NIV version. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." So if I bring this back, as I did say, this is my testimony. I did not think I'd be married by the age of 30, to the extent that I remember at my traditional wedding, we were getting dressed and I was, doing my makeup. And one of the ladies was like, actually, I'm quite shocked that this is quite happening because I never thought you'd get married, which was quite, honest of her to say. But I agree with her. I never thought I'd be married before the age of 30. It was just not in my plan, not in my vision board, but it happened, right? And my career, it literally reads like an extreme sports novel, if something like that even exists, right? I studied chemical and petroleum engineering. Then I started my career out in business consulting. Then I ended up doing support operations in tech. Then they threw me to lead grocery and retail, and now I'm building a luxury brand. Not something I would have put in my vision board, right? And those are just the highlights, right? If we speak about the lowlights, they're also not things that I thought that I'd be going through, right? So I remember when I was studying petroleum engineering, I was in the US, in the middle of America, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I faced xenophobia, I faced racism, I faced loneliness, I faced things that as a 23-year-old were quite harsh for me to face that I never thought being bright-eyed and getting on a plane I would face, right? I faced things that were so distressing that had my mother not in one of the Christmases bought a plane ticket for me and say, "Come home," I don't know what would have happened to me, right? It got to that point. I probably would have failed, been kicked out of uni, and had to repay the US government money that my parents or I didn't have, right? So it got really bad. And then consulting was, yeah, it was worse, right? I thought, okay, I'm through petroleum engineering. I've got it. I've got into one of the best consulting houses in the world. And there, it got from bad to worse, like really, really quickly. I faced depression. I faced humiliation, to the point that I got a chronic illness that is not curable. I can only treat it through lifestyle, which is why I gym so much and why I do step class and all of that. But I face things that I would have never dreamed I'd be facing, And then when we get to tech, right, I now I'm in tech. I'm working for one of the best tech companies in the world. I joined after the IPO, right? Must be great. I had one job in tech when I got my second role in tech. One job, that was to build partnerships. That's all I had to do. It's like, see, all you have to do is just build partnerships. And for 4 years straight, guys, I couldn't build a big partnership. And I started to feel like, what is wrong with me, right? Like, why can't I just have something and have it work out? Why is this not the life that I've built for myself? But I have a hero in the Bible, and his name is Joseph the Dreamer. I've always loved the story of Joseph. And I think the interesting thing about the Bible is when we read it, it sounds like some fable, like something that's there, like these people who are magicians, or it's like, some figment of your imagination. But these people actually lived and these people actually existed. And I think Joseph the Dreamer appeals to me because I loved him because of his story. Like, oh, he was a dreamer and he ended up prime minister of Egypt as a foreigner by the age of 30. But we don't really look at the process. We don't really look at the journey, right? He knew he would be great. So we saw it in Genesis chapter 7:37 that he knew he was going to be great. But then there was Potiphar's house and the accusings that he got that landed him in jail. Then there was his own brothers throwing him in the pit. There was all these horrible things happening to him, even though he knew he was going to be great. And he ended up as the prime minister of Egypt before 30, but not without going through some of the most gruesome things that even I, having looked at my story, I'm like, damn, Joseph, that's quite bad, right? And I think I'd like to offer you that perspective. I don't know you, I don't know your story, but I'd like to offer you a possibility. Could it be that you are frustrated because of whose version of your life you're basing your success on? It could be possible that you're in the prison version of your life, or you are in the ditch version of your life where your brothers have thrown you in this well, or you're in the version of your life where you've been forgotten. Because we know that Joseph, he was, about to get his release, and somebody said, I promise I'll remember you. And they forgot about him for another 2 years, right? So you don't know which stretch of life you're in. And as God said, his thoughts are not your thoughts and his ways are not your ways. But what we do is we sometimes sit and wallow and become in despair because of what we're going through. And it's valid because, going to jail, facing depression, facing xenophobia in a foreign country is not easy. It's not nice, right? But God could be cooking up a story that with you, with your MBA, 7 steps of problem solving, high rocks, analysis paralysis, could have never even dreamed of. Joseph could have never dreamt that he'd be prime minister of one of the most dominant nations at the time at the age of 30. He would have never dreamed that for himself. And that brings me to my point that we are frustrated that this is not the life that we've dreamed for ourselves, but maybe that is the point. You're not supposed to be living the life that you've dreamed for yourself. And we know that because the text tells us his ways are not your ways, neither has thoughts your thoughts. So maybe all we need to do is sit into the journey and surrender. And I'll speak about that in part 2 as I share more about my testimony, about my journeys in tech, and how I eventually landed the deals 4 years later.